Hey everybody, welcome to the kingdom. I'm so excited to have you all here. I'm back with my real guitar today, and so I felt inspired to play a little bit for you all. Hello, 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 welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome, I see all of you. If this is your first time coming in today, I want you to make sure you type first time in the chat box so that you can see and our whole community will welcome you here. Can you all hear the guitar? Welcome back, everybody. And if you are back and if you've been here many times before, let us know in the chat box. And I want every single person here to type in where they're coming from. So where are you chiming in from? I see you, Amber and Barbara and Allison and Mike and Mom and Carrie and Jeannie and Jackie and everybody. We're all together. So I'm back in LA just for a quick moment. And I'm so excited to be here with you all today. And we have a special guest today that I'm very excited to welcome. There we are. We just hit 1,000 people! Ah! Oh my God, that's our first time. We're at 1,000 people! Excuse me for screaming so loud in your ears. Oh my gosh! Oh, my heart is exploding. All right, so I guess this is perfect that I'm singing to celebrate with us today. I think some of you will know this song. And if you know the words to Stand By Me, I want you to just sing along with me. So welcome, everybody. This is the kingdom where we rise together. When the night has come and the land is dark and the moon is the only light we'll see. No, I won't be afraid. No, I won't shed a tear. Just as long as you stand, stand by me. So darling, darling, stand by me. Oh, stand by me. Oh, stand by me. One more time together. So darling, darling, stand by me. Oh, stand by me. Oh, stand by me. Welcome everybody to the kingdom. We are at, I literally am like sitting here just completely blown away that we're here together at 1,007 people from all over the world. So wherever you're chiming in from, Oregon and Washington and Hawaii and Sacramento and Montana and San Francisco and Canada and New York. All over the place, Houston, planet Earth. I love it. That's perfect. So welcome everybody to the kingdom. If this is your first time here, we love you. We welcome you. We thank you. And I'm so excited for today's session and today's special guest, which I have a couple fun things to share with you about this guest who some of you actually know already. And so as we're here, for those of you who are here for the first time especially, and for us to all just come in and come back into this energy and space together, I like to always start with these belief statements, talking about what it is that we believe here at the kingdom. And I see you, Mexico. I see you, Joseph. I see you all. And so the reason why I always like to start with these beliefs is not really to be redundant, but because we experience so much in our week apart, so much. And this is a moment to remind ourselves to anchor back into the truth of what we really believe here, especially in the kingdom. And so we believe here that all beliefs are welcome here. We know that we have so many experiences right now of division, of people with different beliefs who can't talk or hear or see across divides. That's not what we believe here. We remind ourselves that everyone in every different belief is welcome. All biologies are welcome here. We believe in the power of music to open our hearts and our minds, knowing that the music helps us anchor in to the center of our hearts. We believe that wisdom can come from so many places. And so sometimes you'll hear me say words like God or spirit or the universe or crystals, or we'll bring in things from science and we'll weave it all together in this incredible way to wake up the wisdom that's inside of you. We believe here in the kingdom in an expanded definition of self. What is it to be a person in this body? And how does this personhood that we have connect to nature, to other people, to our families, and to all of humanity? And here at the kingdom, we don't just honor or tolerate each other's differences, but we know that we are stronger because of them, and we rise together. And so, welcome to all of you who've been here with me from the beginning. We are at, I believe, our 23rd kingdom. Let me see. Yes, this is our 22nd kingdom. 22 is my favorite number because of my birthday. Our 22nd week together, and some of you have been here from the beginning. Have any of you been here from the beginning? Type in. And I see you, Cindy and Magdalena and everybody here. So let's jump in. Here at the kingdom, what we do is we always begin with some kind of art, music, song, a poem, something, and then we'll do a prayer, which I'll lead us through. And then you'll have a moment to do your own personal prayer. And so for all the new people here, that's a moment where you get to actually set your own intention or welcome in your own religious prayer or spiritual prayer that you want to bring in. And we have this vision that we're holding here at the kingdom that we'll all be together in person one day. And just imagine hearing all of us saying all of our personal prayers and intentions from our different religions and languages all out loud at the same time. And then we'll sing. And then we'll always have a teaching, either from me or a special guest or both, a little practice that we can use. I'll anchor into the teachings a little bit more. And then you'll have your takeaway and an action that you can take with you. Because one of the things that I always loved about church when I was growing up, was that we would get inspired and we would feel so good. But then we'd end up going back to the car and I'd be in a fight with my sisters, like immediately, right? So it's almost like, how do we take these lessons and these things and put them into action in our lives? So you'll get a little bit of that today about when we go into our special topic. So all of that being said, give yourself full permission to arrive here and now. There's nowhere to go, nowhere to rush to. If you're rushing around somewhere right now, just slow it down and give yourself this moment for you. Let's pray. God, Spirit, universe, all that is, all that ever has been, and all that ever will be, we thank you. Thank you for opening our hearts and our minds. Thank you for giving us the dedication and the discipline to come here today, knowing that we can fill ourselves up in community and in your presence. Thank you for bringing us our special guest today with all of her wisdom and knowledge, and may all the words that are spoken here today help us create better boundaries so that we can step into the fullness that is our life and that is the calling that is here for us from you. Thank you, God, Spirit, universe, all that is, for bringing us together, 1,015 people strong from all over the world. This is your moment now to bring in your personal prayer. God, Spirit, universe, all that is, all that ever has been, and all that ever will be, we thank you. May we listen to the messages that are coming through to us. May they anchor and land in our hearts. And may each of us hear the exact message that we are meant to hear today. And let every word that is spoken everything that arises, regardless of if it's traumatic or whatever it is that shows up for us today. Let it be used for the benefit of ourselves and the benefit of all, for transformation. So it is. Ashe, Aho, Salam, Shalom, Amen, Satnam, Om. Thank you. So here we are. I always feel such a deeper sense of arriving. You all feel that when we come here? And so I just want to honor so many of you who are writing in that you've been here from the beginning. Catherine and Allison and Emily and my mom, of course, and Devin and Aaron and Emily and Megan and Carrie and there's so many of you, Susan and Dion. I wish I could read all of your names, but here we are together. So today's session, very excited about today's session. This is one that I almost can't believe we haven't had, but I think the reason we haven't had it is because we were meant to have it with our special guest today. And today's conversation, I almost forgot something. Hold on. Really important thing. I had the next slide coming up. So I'm going to get to today's conversation in a second, but I almost forgot to announce, you guys, that we are adopting a second family for the holidays. So many of you know who were here these past couple weeks is through the pandemic of love, we've adopted one family from the holidays, and they create this Amazon wish list, and we got them everything on their list. And so many of you were writing saying that you wish you could still give something. And so we've adopted a second family for the holidays, which is so amazing. And I want you all to listen to me closely. I'm going to turn the music down so you can just hear what this is about. So Pandemic of Love, Shelly Tegelski, who started Pandemic of Love, they've created something for the holidays where basically what's happened is they've taken families who've lost one or both caretakers or parents due to COVID. And the families who they have kids who are literally orphaned, in some cases. And they're having the kids put together with, obviously an adult, an Amazon wish list to try to still give them the gift of the holidays. And it works just like a baby registry or, baby shower registry or wedding registry. And so I want to tell you a little bit about the second family that we're adopting. And it's so amazing to make, such a direct impact. And I'm going to put the link in the chat box for all of you and tell you how it works. So our family, her name is Sabrina. Okay, Sabrina. And last year, Sabrina, who is a mother of four, lost her husband from cancer. Okay, and then after her husband passed away last year, her mom, Sabrina's mom, moved in with her to help with her kids because Sabrina is an essential worker and had to go to work, and she has 4 young kids under 10. And so here are the kids having to do school and all this stuff, and Sabrina's having to go to work to take care of her and her family. And Sabrina got infected with COVID at work. And she came back home and gave it to her mother. And then her mother passed away from COVID. I just feel that. It's such a fear, that I think so many of us share of passing that to somebody that we love. And so then, because she had to be out of work because she was sick and taking care of her mother, Sabrina got fired from her job. The same job that killed her mother, and this is real. These are real people's lives. She lives here in California, and now she's struggling because her mom and her husband both have passed away. And what she really wants is the chance to help her young kids feel the magic of Christmas after so much trauma, And so I'll tell you all how this works. I'm putting Sabrina's Amazon wish list, and they've all been vetted and all this, so it's all good. Amazon wish list in the chat box. And what you can do is you click on it, and there's a wish list of items, and you'll see even who it's for how old the kids are and everything like that. And this is the most important thing. When you check out, after you buy something, it'll automatically get removed from the list. So everything that's on the list is what's still needed. And so if you see it on the list, it's still needed. And once you buy it, just make sure in your delivery preferences, you'll see a little thing under the additional addresses that allows you to send it to Sabrina's registry. Okay, so make sure you don't send it to your own house. You'll see it in your delivery options. And one other thing that's come up from the last time is some of the items on the list are sold out. And so they asked, what do you do? Well, all you have to do when something is sold out, you'll see who it's for and how old the kid is, or you can look at what size it is. And what Pandemic of Love has told us to do is just to try to find something similar, because our goal is to get them everything on the list. So this is a really amazing opportunity for us to give back. And for those of you who can, and for those of you who can't and aren't in a position to give back, I don't want you to feel bad either. I just want you to feel that our whole community is coming together to support these two amazing families. And so we're sending love to Sabrina and her children. And thank you all for being here to do this with us for the holidays. I think it's super important. Okay, so now, I gave you a false start last time. Now, we're talking about today's session. And today's session is on the power of boundaries. Boundaries, y'all. I know you are all excited because we've been talking about this and circling around it in all different kinds of ways, talking about the power of boundaries and how to set boundaries, how to hold boundaries, how to understand your boundaries, what to do if you're trying to set boundaries and the person isn't respecting your boundaries. What if the person lives with you? All these questions that you've all been throwing out. And I'm going to give you a chance to actually ask some questions to our special guest today. And I've done something this week that I've literally never done anywhere. I've never done it on the Kingdom. I've never done it on my podcast. I've never done it on anything else, which was to have a guest come back for a second time. First time ever doing this. And so it's with great honor that I bring back Kasey Crown. And for those of you who were here last week, you were here to listen to Kasey's conversation about the power of relationships. And one of the conversations that we wanted to get into was about boundaries, and we didn't have time. So I brought Kasey back here today to talk about the power of our boundaries. And her website is here at the bottom, kaseycrown.com. And so without further ado, Kasey, I welcome you. I welcome you. I welcome you. Hello, darling. Everybody say what's up to Kasey.
Hi, Justin. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me back. This is so fun.
It's so amazing to have you back.
Thank you. It's really my pleasure. And I had so much fun last week. And I know we talked a lot about trauma, our relationship to trauma last week. And so boundaries is actually a favorite topic of mine. So I'm really excited to share on this topic today.
Yeah, me too. It's going to be phenomenal. And Kasey, you know what's weird? For some reason, I'm having a weird delay between your voice and the video. So what I'm going to ask you to do very quickly, it'll be simple, is just close out, come right back in, and then I'll have you right back in. Yep.
And click the link. Okay, perfect.
Totally. Okay, cool. So Kasey will be right back. I just wanted to make sure that the experience was the best possible for all of you, and we'll have her come right back. But in the meantime, what I would like all of you to do is type in the chat box. Here comes Kasey. Perfect. Great. So Kasey, welcome back. Welcome back.
Hello.
Much better. Clear? Perfect. Much better. Yeah. And so what I asked people to do is type into the chat box, and we'll come back to these, any questions that you have about boundaries. Anything you're going through on setting boundaries with a coworker, with a friend, with a family member, with a lover, and we'll come back to this. So Kasey, I have these slides available, but I just want to give you the floor a little bit to talk about boundaries, why boundaries, and you can tell me when to put up what you'd like to see on screen.
Yeah, I think maybe we should start with that first slide on the power of relationships, so we can just do a brief review from last week, because the conversation we had last week really does segue. I think it's the next one.
There we go.
Yes. So, there's a link between our conversation last week and this week. And if you weren't here last week, it's totally okay. we are going to just give a brief review here so that you get a general idea, so that when we talk about boundaries, you have a little bit of context. So in our conversation about the power of relationship, we talked about how our traumatic experiences, right, any injury we experience in our lives, creates an unconscious filter through which we view our reality, right? And those filters include cognitions about our worth and value, right? So if we experience a trauma in the form of abuse, if we experience a trauma in the form of loss, oftentimes we have these unconscious thought processes called cognitions that store in the unconscious memory. And they're things like, I'm not enough, I'm not worthy, I'm not lovable, right? If we've experienced abandonment or loss or abuse of any kind. And these store in our unconscious memory, and they really do become the filters through which we view our reality and affect how we relate to others in our environment, right? And it creates confusion, right? Something we call dissonance, because we all know that we're worthy, we all know that we're lovable, but oftentimes our behavior does not reflect that reality, right? Because we're holding that story in our unconscious mind. And I call those really our core pain pictures. Our core pain pictures are these kind of unworthiness pictures or lovability pictures, right? So one of the things that happens when we experience this kind of fragmentation or dissonance as a result of our traumatic experiences is we can end up kind of withdrawing into isolation, into a more depressive state. We can engage in kind of more chaotic behaviors that are self-harming behaviors, or we can enter into a cycle of toxic competition, right? So in a cycle of toxic competition, we end up directing our energy toward attempting to prove our worth and prove our lovability, either to ourselves or to others. And I'm sure, Justin, you can relate to this. I can certainly relate to it throughout my life, right? This kind of self-doubt, and I'm not enough, and I'm not worthy. And so we will end up kind of making choices throughout our lives and in relationships where we're trying to disprove or prove our worth, right?
Yeah, I think this is so valuable because when we have, you really awakened me to something about this the first time I heard you say this, Kasey, and I want you all to hear what she's saying. Like, so I remember, as a kid, always feeling like two things. Like, one, feeling like I wasn't masculine enough, right? Because I was always getting teased and bullied for how I walked and how I talked, and getting corrected at home about not being strong enough and playing sports and always being the weak one on the bench. And so I just realized, even just a few months ago, as an adult, even the way that I've been trying to like work out and the body that I've been trying to force myself to have was still me trying to prove, okay, even though I'm not that masculine, even though I'm not one of those athletic guys, like I can still show up and present like one, and showing how it actually created this toxic relationship that people have heard me talk about that I've had with eating and with working out and with exercise, because it was like me trying to prove this thing wrong that was really just coming from a trauma in the first place. And once I dropped that, I was like, oh my God, I've been spending my whole life trying to prove this thing wrong. And I don't need to do that anymore. Who am I without, it's okay, don't worry. We all have dogs in the background. So who am I without trying to prove, anything like that wrong? And, one more thing I'll say is, even with me in singing, I know a lot of people will relate to this with their art. Like as a kid, I always felt like I wasn't a good enough singer. And so many times now in my music in the past, I don't do this as much anymore, but I would, instead of just singing what was authentic to me, I would be trying to sing to prove that I can sing instead of just singing, and instead of just sharing my voice. So this all feels really important and valuable. And I don't want you to worry about your dog. It's fine. It's not a big deal. Yeah, don't let it bother you at all. It's not bothering us. We're good. We all know how it is.
Yeah, no, I think you bring up some really important points, right? And it also is about the messages that we've received from our environment, right? So if our environment is giving us feedback that we have to be thin and we have to be fit and we have to be masculine and we have to be this in order to be lovable,
Yeah.
then we're going to do everything in our power to become those things, even if it's out of alignment with who we truly are. And then we end up in this kind of process of self-abandonment. And it's unconscious, it's not intentional, but I think it shows up in a lot of subtle ways. And so really, when we experience trauma, our self-esteem gets deteriorated.
Yeah.
And we, like I said, we can easily enter into these patterns of kind of abandoning the self, depending on the circumstance. And so boundaries, to me, and if you put up the second slide, I think this will be helpful.
Yeah.
Third slide.
Whoopsies. Hold on. I accidentally just I closed it out. Hold on a second. So I'm going to give you 1 second, everybody. My bad. We're having a little funny tech moments today. So here come the slides again, and I'm going to have to just scoot back to that. Okay. So we were on...
I think the third one of mine.
Cool. Almost there. 1 second, everybody. There we go. Right?
There we go.
Okay.
Yep.
Sorry, everybody.
Yeah. So you'll see I put kind of a V next to boundaries here, because boundaries are an action, right? In my field, we're working a lot on building self-awareness, right? And in mindfulness practice, I'm sure many of you are mindfulness practitioners. So in mindfulness practice, we're really working to build awareness, right? But awareness is not enough to change our lives and our relationships. And this is really important because, and we talked about this, Justin, a couple of weeks ago, it's like we can be incredibly self-aware, but if we aren't actionizing that awareness in our lives, then growth does not occur and healing does not occur. Okay?
That's really important. I just want to pin that for people because I'll put this up here, the V next to boundaries as a verb, right? Just to make sure that's super clear for everybody that boundaries are a verb and it's an action, and you can have as much awareness as you want. And I see people saying this in here in the chat that they have sometimes this level of awareness, they have their own practices, they have these different things, but the awareness doesn't do anything, it doesn't create any change unless you're actually able to take it and turn it into action.
That's right.
Yeah.
And oh my gosh, my dog.
You really don't have to worry. It's not as loud as you think. And I think everybody here all has the experience of having their dog or their kids or somebody yelling in the background. It's not anywhere near as loud as you think. So just keep talking.
Okay, but yes, so what's important is every time we set a boundary, right? This is an act of self-love. And what happens as we set a boundary is that we start to actionize self-esteem, right? And not only is it an act of self-esteem, but it also starts to increase our self-esteem. Okay. So perfect. So as you can see, there are a few things that we need in order to set appropriate boundaries, right? One is we need agency, okay? So if you're in a context, right, where perhaps you're under 18 and living in an oppressive family system where it's difficult to set boundaries, then there is a lack of agency and a lack of ability to do that under certain circumstances, right? And of course, there are other circumstances under which we have less agency, right? But if we have agency and we're capable of making choices and protecting ourselves in certain ways, we need awareness, right? So that's the mindfulness piece, right? We have to really be able to attune to our own deepest knowing, right? Our own deepest knowing. So what that means is if I'm in a relationship with someone and they're asking me to do something and my body, right? My body, the initial response in my body is no, right? But I am afraid of disappointing that person, or I have a story that if I say no, there will be consequences, right? And I choose to disregard my embodied knowing, right? Then I've entered into a kind of a mini self-abandonment, right?
Mm-hmm.
So part of what we want to do as we learn to set boundaries is really attune to our knowing, right? And make choices based on, right, what is in the highest and best good,
Okay.
right?
So can I pause you there for a second? Because I think a lot of us go through this, and I can tell what everybody's saying in the chat box. And also, you should see everybody saying how much they love your dog and they love your pet, and well, let him bark and like all that kind of stuff. So don't even trip at all. People are like, I wish I could see your dog. So if you want to bring your dog in the frame, you're welcome to. So anyway,
Right now he's too busy looking for animals outside.
okay, cool. So the question that I have that I'm making sure I'm clarifying is, I think we all experience this moment where somebody asks you to do something or for something, and your first response, like immediate, is, I don't have time. I'm overwhelmed. I don't have the space. I don't have the energy. This is going to tax me in a way that I want to say no. And then we hold our breath and we make excuses like, oh, well, this person's really going through a hard time, or I should show up for them, or whatever it is. And then we end up saying yes. And what you're saying is when we do that, what we're actually doing is doing self-abandonment on our own selves. So what is the line then?
Okay, so there are circumstances under which you'll go, oh, the answer is no. And I'm going to really look at this consciously and assess whether or not, this is something I'm going to choose to do, knowing that it doesn't feel like the best choice, but it might be, for other reasons, it might be a choice that I want to make. But for the most part, right, if we're habitually experiencing a knowing in our body that we don't want to do something and we're doing it to please other people, right, we're entering into sort of a codependent relationship with others in our environment, then what the story that we're telling ourselves is that in order for me to be well and me to be happy, I have to meet that person's needs, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so our needs come second, right? Under those circumstances. And if you're if you're habitually putting other people's needs before your own, right, then there's a boundary issue there. Okay?
Got it.
Alternatively, if you're in a relationship with someone, let's say, and that person is not able to, perhaps you have deal breakers in a relationship, right? And the partner that you've chosen is consistently not showing up for you in the way that you need, right? And you have a story that you really want a particular outcome. You want this relationship to work, right? And so you're hanging on in hopes that your partner will change. I'm going to use this example because I was just working with someone yesterday on this topic. You're hanging on in hopes that this partner will change. But their actions have consistently demonstrated that they're not going to change, right? So what you've done is you've formed an attachment to an outcome, right? And you're consistently abandoning yourself in the context of that relationship by setting a boundary and asking for what you need, and then not holding the boundary when that person isn't able to show up for you in that way, right?
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it made so much sense that I can't even speak. It's just like it makes so much sense. Hands up if anybody else relates to that. Hands up. And I know for those of you who are new to the kingdom, what we do anytime we, hear something that somebody says that we love, we either throw our emoji hands up in the chat, or if you can't throw your emoji hands up, you can just throw little smiley faces in the chat. So, all right, that's big, Kasey. That's big.
Right. So pop up the slide up for one more second.
Okay. Yeah, just feel free to tell me to go back to them anytime. It's easy.
Okay. So one of the things that we need in order to set boundaries, and something that we actually, boundaries, we also cultivate resilience through setting boundaries, is we need to let go of our fear of disappointing people, right? Because oftentimes when we set boundaries, we have to tolerate disappointment. And many of us are conditioned to be so uncomfortable with disappointment, with holding another person's disappointment, that we're willing to abandon our own knowing in order to ensure that somebody else is not uncomfortable. Therefore, I won't have to sit with the discomfort of having caused that, right?
You're dropping so many gems right now. Keep going.
Right? But the reality is, what we want to do is we want to become resilient to holding someone's disappointment, right? We can be in a place of compassion about having to disappoint someone, right? And also say, and I know intuitively that this is what's in the highest and best good, and this is the choice I'm going to make. And I'm sorry that that disappoints you, right? So part of what we need to do as we learn to set boundaries is expand our window of tolerance for disappointment, right? And we talked about that last week when talking about trauma, because healing trauma is all about expanding our window of tolerance for discomfort so that we can move through the healing process.
Got
right?
it. Yeah.
Okay.
I want to just like, people are losing their minds in the chat right now. So like, and I get it, because I love that what you're saying that I want to pin for everybody is that what we're actually doing often, it's almost like a story I know that we tell ourselves, is we're saying, oh, like, I just don't want to hurt their feelings, or I just don't want to whatever. And we're trying to play the martyr, almost like we're being this good person by showing up for people or helping them or doing whatever we want to do, even though we really want to say no, or we want to set a boundary. But what you're saying is, what we're actually most afraid of is we're not really doing it because we want to help them. What we actually are doing is avoiding feeling that we've caused them disappointment. And
Yes.
so what we're able to do is expand that window of tolerance, and you're calling that resilience. And I love that. What we want to become more resilient to is our ability to sit with people's disappointment in the face of our truth. We don't want to become more resilient to abandoning ourselves constantly. Like, we don't want to become more resilient
Exactly.
to
We
that.
don't want to continue to reinforce that habit. And
Yeah.
by the way, like, all of us have abandoned ourselves in certain ways, right? I can identify a million situations in my life where I have done just that, right? I've known at a deep level a truth and chosen not to listen to it, right? And so as you start to consider, right, healing, right? I cannot emphasize enough how important boundaries are for the healing process, right? To me, it's like I am most attracted to people with great boundaries,
Yeah.
right? Because I feel safe with them. I
Yeah.
feel like this person is listening to their knowing, and that makes me feel safe, right? They're the most impressive people in the world because they're really just like, I am going to really listen to my intuitive knowing here, right?
Yeah.
And it takes a lot of courage to do that, right? It
Yeah.
takes courage to listen to ourselves, especially when we grew up in a context or when we've, lived in an environment where what we know to be true has been disregarded in some way, right?
Yeah. Gosh, this is bringing up so much, because it feels, I agree with you in that when somebody, I've gotten a lot better at setting boundaries in the last few years. It's been like a major work for me of being able to
Mhm.
hold that. And I remember one of my teachers saying to me, a mentor who I was talking to, the thing about that you just named of you feel safest. You can actually go deeper with somebody who sets clear boundaries. And they said the words that were beautiful: clear boundaries, no limits, which was so beautiful, because
Love
once I have the boundary, I can be totally free within that boundary. Versus
that.
if the other person isn't holding their own boundaries, then now it becomes my job to try to figure out and mind read and figure out what their boundaries are and what their boundaries are not, and if they're comfortable, if they're not comfortable. I think this is like, it happens a lot with dating. You're like not really sure where somebody is, so you're trying to like guess. Where if somebody's just firm in what they stand for, then you can just relax and be at ease within the boundaries that are set, which feels really beautiful to me.
Yeah, and I think in relationship in particular, especially when you're starting out in a relationship, right? That guessing that you're describing, right? It's like we've stopped being explicit, right? So communication is a boundary,
Yeah.
right? And we have to remember that, right? And how we communicate, right, demonstrates the degree to which we are honoring ourselves and honoring others. So if we are spinning out on a story and wondering whether or not someone likes us, or something in a dating relationship, and we're not honoring the curiosity that we have and saying, I'm going to be courageous and explicit and share my concerns and ask for what I need, right? Like, then we're living in story, right? And
Yeah.
we're creating distance between us and that person, right? But what you're bringing up is so important, because the other thing, when you say, with boundaries, there's no limitation. What I love about that is, one of the things we talked about last week is when we experience trauma and we have unresolved trauma and we're relating, right? That was the power of relationships. We are relating to people through that filter of our trauma. We end up adopting coping strategies, right? That are either chaotic or rigid. Do you remember when we talked about this?
I do. Yeah.
So chaotic coping strategies are more like a lack of impulse control, right? And rigid coping strategies are more about control. Okay. We
Okay.
talked about last week, and boundaries are the same, right? So if we have chaotic boundaries, it means we don't have boundaries, right? There is no boundary. If we have rigid boundaries, then they look more like rules. Okay. And I want to draw a distinction between boundaries and rules, because they are not the same thing.
Cool.
I think people think of the word boundary and they think it's like this harsh, wall that we create, but boundaries are not walls. They are flexible and adaptable, and you get to develop them. They are emergent and they are based on your knowing, right? And yeah, there's that slide, right? So healthy boundaries are flexible and adaptable, and maladaptive boundaries are chaotic or rigid, right? So by flexible and adaptable, I mean they're emergent based on your knowing, right? And so you can have a relationship with the same person and today feel, right, that my knowing is saying, I can't do that. And tomorrow feel like my knowing is saying, you know what, I have the bandwidth for that, right? And because I said no yesterday doesn't mean I can't say yes today, right? When we think of boundaries like rules, right? And oftentimes, if we're experiencing unresolved trauma, then we need rules, right? So we're using rules as a form of self-protection, right? We're trying to build walls around us so that we feel safe, because our system becomes overwhelmed by all the stimulation in our relationships. So boundaries are really flexible and adaptable. And I want you to really think of them as a practice of listening to your knowing, right? Communicating or acting on that knowing, and holding a space of resilience for whatever the consequence, right? Because every choice has a consequence. Whatever the consequence of my action, right? My boundary, my following my knowing is, right? Which may be disappointment. It may be walking away from a relationship. It may be walking away from a job. It may be saying no walking away from an oppressive system of some kind, right? So you have to remember, like, boundaries aren't just happening in our, home relationships. They're happening in every area of our lives, right?
Yeah.
That
This is amazing. And, I want to go back to one thing on a previous slide, because I want to make sure you touch on this, because my mind, my curiosity is piqued about it, was this final slide, or this final thing here about trust. So you said that we have the agency, we have our awareness, we learn to build our resilience and our capacity for what happens when we set the boundary. And then where does this trust come into play when we set the boundaries?
Yeah, so trust comes into play in a couple of different ways, right? So when I set a boundary, I need to be able to trust two things.
Yeah.
I need to be able to trust in my own resilience, that resilience that we just talked about, that I'm going to be okay, even if this causes some sort of conflict or creates a more challenging situation than I bargained for. If it's in alignment with my knowing, right, and I set that boundary, I'm building resilience, but I'm also, what I really need in order to tolerate that, potentially tolerate the disappointment, is trust, right? Not only trust in my own capacity to attend to whatever emerges as a result of the choice that I've made, right? But for you, for me, and for others probably on this call, there's also kind of a divine trust,
Yeah,
right?
I was hoping that you were going to say that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, okay, like, I'm trusting that I'm going to be okay and that I'm being held, because part of what I know to be true is that as I listen to that knowing, which is my spirit communicating to me, right, that I will be okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes what's so important, Kasey, I'm so glad you said this, is because especially here at the Kingdom, trusting in that divine knowing that Oprah always says. It's like one of my favorite quotes that I read from her. I have it in my phone for when I get in that weird space of like trusting that the universe, God, spirit, whatever, has a greater plan for your life than you could ever even imagine for yourself. And so when you have that knowing come, even if sometimes it doesn't make sense to you, follow it, because there's something on the horizon when you're tapped into that place that you might not even be able to see, you know? And so anyway, this just feels really, really relevant to me, I think, on so many levels.
Yeah. I had a spiritual teacher early on in my career that would say, you know, something along the, I don't have the quote, it's not going to roll off the top of my head, but she would say something along the lines of like, a mystery arises, meaning that's your knowing. We don't always know why we're being guided to make a particular choice, right? A mystery arises, we make a choice, and another mystery follows, right? What that means is I don't know what the consequences of my choice are going to be. When we are in fear, when we are coming from fear as opposed to trust, then we are attached to a particular outcome, right? And so if we're attached to a particular outcome, we will try to control, right, in order to achieve that outcome, right?
And so this is why if somebody doesn't respond the way we think they're going to respond, so we set a boundary, they don't respond the way we want, and so then we try to control the outcome in the situation, and we freak out, basically.
Potentially, you know, I mean, I think it depends on the circumstances. Certainly that's a possibility. Alternatively, it's like we set a boundary, someone doesn't honor it, and maybe that's a moment at which we need to set a stronger boundary, right? So we talked about the possibility of, you know, you mentioned this early on in your list of questions that might emerge on this topic, which is that, you know, we might set a boundary and somebody might not honor it.
Yeah.
Right. So there are circumstances under which we have to go, oh, I need a stronger boundary than the one that I just attempted to set. Right. And so in a relationship, for example, if somebody consistently is violating your boundaries, then the boundary might end up being, I have to walk away from this relationship.
Yeah.
Right. So again, it's like if we're so attached to the relationship working and we are not in trust, right? That if we honor our knowing and we walk away, that something else will emerge, right? And that something else might actually be that person going, "Oh, now I'm ready," right?
Yeah.
So you never know what the consequences are going to be, but if there is a loyalty to your soul, right? Then you really can't go wrong, even if the consequences are challenging.
This is beautiful. The loyalty to your soul. I want you all to type that in. If there's a loyalty to your soul, then you can't go wrong. Type that in, because people are losing their minds in the chat box. I wish you could see. Everyone's like, my notes are all over the place because they're just like going crazy. And so luckily you can all come back and watch this right away. The recording is available at the same link right away after the session is over. And one of the things that feels relevant to me to mention, like as you're talking about this sense of disappointment and control and all of this, is I think one of the things that I find, and I talk to a lot of my clients and people about this, is when we end up not saying something or not setting a boundary as firmly as we need to set it. We kind of set a boundary, but then we like flower it up and back off of it, or we don't say the whole truth. And oftentimes people are saying, well, I didn't want to say that because I don't want to hurt their feelings, or I didn't want to say that because I didn't feel like they needed to know that part or whatever. And sometimes that's the case. But what I have found in speaking the whole truth, just as it actually is for your soul, is you give the other person permission to choose how they want to actually show up to the truth. And what happens so often, I find, is we're like manipulating the truth and how we communicate it so that we can try to shift and control the way that their response is going to be to the way that we're saying things. And I've watched myself do this so many times in the past. Like, I really want to tell this person this, but I'm going to say it this way. And then I'm wondering why the boundary is not held, because I just set, like, instead of putting up a fence, I put like a tulip in the ground. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
anyways, I don't know if you have anything to say about that,
No,
but
I think that brings up a really important point, which is that you cannot control how other people respond to you, and you're also not responsible for it,
yeah,
right?
that's it. Yeah.
So all you can do is show up in your integrity, and you have to let go of your attachment to how people respond to that and not take ownership over their response, right? So what you're describing right now is you're putting tulips down because you're afraid, you're in fear,
Yeah.
right? And you're feeling responsible for how they receive your truth,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You're not responsible for how someone receives your truth, especially if you're communicating it from a place of integrity and love,
Yeah.
right? So, one of the things that I always tell my clients, especially when they have to set a really difficult boundary, possibly with a loved one or a partner or what have you, is I say, lead with love, right?
Mm.
Open the door with, I love you, and,
Yeah.
right? I'm having this conversation with you because it's really important to me that we become closer, right? Immediately, you've just brought that person in, right? And another thing that you can also do and experiment with, and this works in certain circumstances, is you can say, I want to have this conversation with you, right? And here's what I need from you, right? And you actually lay the groundwork for the kind of response that you're looking for from them, right? I need you to be open, right? I need you to recognize that this is coming from a place of love. I need you to, right? So you're actually kind of creating the conditions for a more open conversation to occur, right? Sometimes when we set a boundary that looks like a rule, right, we shut people down and they go into defensiveness, right? And so part of what we want to do is, yeah, the tulips we want to lay are they, they are about becoming creative with our communication, not in a manipulative way, but in a way that's about mutual regard,
Yeah.
right? That's about, I see you, you see me, let's come together and have a conversation about how we can engage in a practice of mutual regard in this relationship, right?
So
And
what about, though, when you have somebody who you can't have that kind of conversation with? Do you know what I mean? Who's just like can't show up in that loving space? Like, what do you do? What do you do in those cases?
then your boundary has to become a little bit stronger,
A little bit
right?
firmer, a little bit stronger. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
So, again, I mentioned agency at the beginning. It depends on who that person is and what their relationship is to you. But if you have a choice not to be in relationship with people that continually violate your boundaries,
Yeah.
right, and aren't really interested in your truth or your well-being, then that's a signal, right? And an opportunity for you to go, you know what? No. And this is why boundaries and self-esteem are so linked, right? Because our relationships are a reflection, they're a mirror,
Yeah.
right? So if we are in relationship to people that are violating our boundaries, it is not their fault, right? It's our responsibility to set boundaries if we have agency, right?
Yeah.
So, everybody's doing the best they can with their level of integration and with what we know, right? But if what you know to be true is that if what your attention is consistently focused on is this person is doing this to me, right? Then I would be kind of flipping the script a little bit and going, what is it inside of me that is having a difficult time setting a
Setting a
boundary and saying,
boundary to accept this. Yeah. Yeah. And that's how it's this dance, right? And I love how putting it in the context of last week, it's about relationship, right? Everything is about how we're in relationship. And I see so many things coming in the chat. I want to share one quick story because I know the stories ground it for people in some ways. So I had, and I'm just sending so much love to those of you right now here. Just know we see you in the chat box that are going through a hard time and having boundaries that you're having to put up and these painful, situations. Just know that we're here with you and we love you. And we know that sometimes this is tough. And I'll tell you a story just right in time of seeing this from you is, a couple years ago now, I had to set a really strong boundary and have a really, really big conversation with my dad. And it was so scary to me. It was like the scariest conversation that I had ever had to have. It was about, his domestic violence when I was younger. and the conversation that we needed to have today and how that was showing up today and a boundary that I needed to set. And what was so fascinating, I think this is interesting about like the people you surround yourself with and the relationship is I luckily I was coached through it, but I said exactly what you said, literally word for word in my conversation with him. I said, I'm having this conversation with you because I love you and I want to bring us closer. And we'll never actually be able to have the relationship that I think we both want if we don't have this conversation. And so here's my truth. And I laid it out like it at my truth, not you did this, you did that, you did this. Like I said, this is what happened and this is how it's affecting me. And so I just owned how it was affecting me, said it with so much love. And my dad flipped out. I mean, like, when I tell you flipped out, like and I even said to him, like, I'm not even trying to call you out. I'm not trying to argue. I'm just trying to have a conversation. What you have to, I think people have to remember is no one had ever approached my dad like that. So from his level of awareness, all he could hear was like, I was coming in for a fight, you know? And I'm like just in the peacemaker in the family. So it was like, what, you know? And so what happened, my dad calls my aunt and calls my sisters and it like enrolls like the whole family. And then people are calling me, how could you say that to dad? You know, like, how could you? I can't believe you should call him. You should apologize. And I had this anchoring in, thankfully, because I had done so much work on myself to know, no, like the relationship that I want is never going to happen if I don't hold this. And I know where I'm coming from. I know what my intention is. I'm going to trust in the flow of the universe of what happens. So I'm going to tell you all what happened. So my dad and I talk most days, like briefly at least on text message or something. He didn't talk to me for 2 or 3 weeks, which was a long time for us. Complete radio silence. And so I finally call him and I'm like, hey, I just want to remind you that I'm here to bring us closer. And what happened was he ended up having a conversation with my grandfather, with his dad, about the domestic abuse that he saw when he was younger. And working on, it was like a total unexpected thing. And my dad and my grandpa ended up getting to have this conversation with themselves that I think needed to heal before my dad could actually even show up for me. And so it literally rippled through the generations. And my dad and I ended up having, in the best way that he was able to show up for, this really beautiful, loving conversation that now has, our boundaries have been able to expand because we were able to go there. So it really showed me like your process of like stepping into my awareness, my truth, the resilience I had to hold of the unexpected response of my whole family joining the army, you know, and then standing in it until luckily the outcome for me was positive. But for some people, the outcome isn't. But I was willing to stand in the truth of it until I figured out what it was that was going to happen, you know? And so anyway, my mom, she was with me the whole way because she knew, she was like, I got you. I got your back. Like, I got your back. You don't have to do anything. So anyway, I was just.
And that brings up a great point, right? That if you're going to be setting a really difficult boundary with someone, it's really nice to recruit a support system to hold the space for you on the periphery when you do that. So, to have your mom hold that space for you is amazing. But you also brought up something that's so important, which is that space, right? That resilience building space where you were like, you know what? No, I made this choice because it's in alignment with my knowing. I'm going to hold here, right? I'm going to let him sit with his feelings and his experience about this instead of going in to try to take them away and rescue them. And oh, never mind. And oh,
I have to fix this because I don't want my dad to be upset.
On it. Right. So now because we are all kind of conditioned to want people's approval, right? That is really hard. So when I'm talking about expanding our window of tolerance for discomfort, right? It's not just our discomfort, it's holding a space for other people to spin in their own discomfort as they start to reconcile what you've just communicated and not needing to go in and over-explain and rescue them from those feelings out of anxiety, out of your own anxiety, right? To want resolution. Sometimes things take a little bit of time. And so that's where you need to hold the trust, right? Be resilient. lean on your support systems, right? And continue to listen to your knowing. If you had felt that there was another intervention that was necessary, then that would have emerged. But what you did was you held, right? You just held. And what ultimately happened was some healing occurred, enough so that your dad could return to you and re-enter the conversation from a different
Yeah.
vantage.
And on his timeline, and I love what you're saying here that I want to pin for people, Kasey, is like, it's we're rushing. Like the old me would have like, oh my God, like let me rush in. I don't want my dad to be upset. I don't like, let me make sure I communicated clearly. It was like, no, I communicated clearly. Give him his space to process. And had I not done that, he would have never had the conversation with my grandpa, you know? And so like opening up and letting the healing and the space happen. And sometimes it takes weeks, sometimes it takes days, sometimes it takes years, you know, for people to show up and have the learning that they need to have to be able to show up in healthier relationship to you. It's beautiful. I want to pull up, if it's okay, Kasey, some questions.
Yeah.
So from people. So this is so I'm pulling some of your questions from earlier. So Anna asked, she said, I would love support on communicating boundaries in a compassionate way. I think sometimes trying to set boundaries, I feel rigid in the way I talk about them or imagine them myself. So I know you talked already a little bit about this differentiating factor, and I'll put the slide up for people again about boundaries and healthy and maladaptive boundaries. So if you want to just dig into that for Anna a little bit more, that would be great, Kasey.
Yeah, I mean, again, if you have a specific example of what you mean, it would be helpful because my response will differ slightly depending on the circumstances. But I would really essentially just reference what we just talked about in terms of compassion, in terms of leading with love, right? It's like, what is the way into the person's heart with whom I am going to be speaking right now? Is there a way that I can connect to them first through that heart space so that they feel safe, right? Because part of what we're wanting to do is create the conditions of safety in our relationships, right? And if you're somebody that has a high level of self-esteem, then you're not coming at people, right, to set boundaries. What you're doing is you're creating a safe space, and you're allowing for boundaries to be an invitation, and one that if they don't accept, you might have to make another choice. But they aren't a threat either. They're an invitation, right? Here's how I need to honor my own knowing, right? I'm inviting you into a conversation about that because I'm struggling in our relationship, because I feel consistently like I'm not being regarded in a particular way, right? Yeah. And I'm curious. One of the things that I will do before I set a boundary often is say, here's what I'm noticing happening. I'm curious about this. Like, let's frame it in the form of a question. Like, what's going on for you, right? I'm noticing that I'm wanting your approval. And so I keep disregarding this knowing, right? What are you experiencing, right? What's the story you're telling yourself about if I were to say no to that question?
Yeah.
Or, right? You start to go, let's unpack this together, and you enter into a conversation that's more about curiosity and then about, okay, well, now that we have that information, because oftentimes, especially when we have unresolved trauma, our minds, right? We talked about this last week, our minds, right? Our subjective sense of self, who we think we are very tricky, right? We will go into all sorts of story without checking the other person first, whether or not that story is actually true, right? So part of what we want to do is, right, a compassionate way to set boundaries is to invite the person with whom you're setting a boundary with into an investigation around what's transpiring in the relationship, right? With an intention. Yeah. I might set an intention with them and say, hey, my intention in having this conversation is to address something that's challenging for me, and I want to invite you into a conversation with me about it because I feel like we could really resolve this together, right? Yeah. So you're like a team as opposed to here's the boundary, right? I'm feeling unsafe. I'm feeling disregarded. Right? Here's the story I'm telling myself. Do you see the difference, the subtle difference between those?
It's a big difference. Yeah, it's subtle, but it's big because and especially like you're able to actually create this space of healing for somebody. And even if you have to still be the one to set the boundary, you're opening up that space. I love it. Instead of like coming with a rule, you're more just coming to investigate and share the dilemma. Here's what I'm experiencing. this is what I notice. What are you experiencing? What's happening for you? Let's talk about this. Okay, given that, here's what I think I need to do. Or here's what maybe we think needs to happen. And it's a very different way of boundary setting than I need to cut you burn this person out kind of thing, you know.
And listen, you're all intuitive people. Like there are people with whom that kind of conversation is going to be difficult, right? So
Mm-hmm.
again, it's about, okay, well, who is this person then that I'm in relationship to? Is it a family member, which makes it a semi-mandatory relationship? And can I have a different kind of conversation and set a boundary with that? Is it an employer, right? Is it, because depending on the person, you know, and their personality, how you set the boundary might look a little bit different.
Yeah. Can I go to another question? So I feel like this is a really good one. This person said and I don't have their name here, so if it's you, just know I don't have your name in the chat. It says, sometimes I feel like I lose the right to set a boundary because of my acting out or bad behavior. And so because usually I haven't set a boundary, like how do I get out of this cycle? Like feeling like I shouldn't be able to set a boundary because I'm also not perfect kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's an interesting one, right?
Great question. Beautiful self-awareness, right? We're not perfect, right? We can all be sloppy in our communication and our behavior. And, you know, I think, again, that would be a really, depending on the relationship that you're attempting to set a boundary with, that would be one where the two of you would want to come together and investigate the pattern, right?
Yeah.
Because it's like you're both experiencing something chaotic within the context of the relationship. And so if there's, you know, if what you desire is greater safety, more mutual regard in the relationship, then what you're going to want to do is come to the relationship and say, hey, I want to take accountability for how I've been showing up. And I want to explore that with you, right? Because I recognize that I participate in this relationship in a way that has deteriorated your trust of me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm also experiencing, you know, feeling like I can't trust you, like we're in this pattern. And if we're invested in the relationship and in our own well-being, then we can hang in there through those conversations, right?
Yeah.
We're at that level of emotional maturity where we can hang in there for the conversation, which may be very uncomfortable. Then like what you'll see is that it will move forward. If you're attempting to have this conversation with someone that is really invested in not hearing you, right? Then, you know, again, that begs the question, is this the right relationship for me, right? I think it's Brené Brown that says something like the only people, you know, that don't want you to have boundaries are the ones that are benefiting from you not having any.
Yes, she does say that.
I feel like that's a Brené quote.
Yep. Only people who don't want you to have boundaries are the people who benefit from you not having any. I think that is such a. I remember the first time I heard that, it was one of those quotes that went boom, you know?
Yeah.
Because then you have this look at the people in your life and you're like, oh my gosh, like they're actually only really in my life because I'm so porous with my boundaries. And
right.
okay.
You have to remember the law of magnetic attraction. Right? We will attract people that will violate our boundaries if we don't have any to begin with. Right? So remember, if your relationships are mirrors, then that is an opportunity. See that relationship as a reflection going, oh, okay, this person is here, right? Is a spiritual teacher, is here to help me learn how to develop boundaries. Yeah. Right?
That question, what is my soul trying to learn? What is my soul trying to learn? And so the last question that I want to ask, and we have so many in here, and if anybody has a specific situation, just I want to give you all the opportunity for that, and I maybe can pull one, a specific situation that you're going through that you're comfortable sharing some details about so that Kasey can give you like a pointed answer, type that into the chat box, and I will do my best to see it and bring it up, okay? And before we do that, I want to make sure that I repost the link to Sabrina's Amazon wish list, because several of you have already written in the chat box to ask me for that, and I know some of you have to leave early. So I'm posting that in the chat box for all of you, for those of you who want to make sure that you get the gift. So if anybody has a specific situation, type it in. In the meantime, I have one more question that I want to pull forward here from Carrie. And Carrie said that I can only set boundaries when I get pushed to my limit, and then I lash out. And the
Mm-hmm.
boundaries are strong. I feel like I relate to this in some ways, Carrie. Like it's like this has to like build up to a point where I have to set the boundary. And so, what do you do about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, again, that becomes both a chaotic and a rigid boundary, right? Because you're swinging to the chaotic side in that your kind of cup is running over with distress. So it's like there's an urgency to setting the boundary when you're doing it. And then also the boundary, right? Because you have not spent the time consistently setting the boundary as you become aware inside your body throughout however long that period is that you need to set the boundary, right? It feels like the boundary that needs to be set is that much bigger, right? So we're going to go more rigid and more kind of rule oriented with that kind of boundary. So I can appreciate that question. And essentially what it comes down to is, how can I get into the habit of consistently honoring what it is that I need? And really, this is where mindfulness practice is really useful, right? It's about going, you're in a relationship and you're getting pinged left and right in your body. You're feeling something like, oh, and then you don't say something about the thing that you're feeling. Put one coin in the bank of unspoken things that I am going to start to like fill up on.
Yeah.
So part of the practice, right? Because remember, setting boundaries is a practice. It is a practice of communicating our needs lovingly, right? And it is a practice of building self-esteem and resilience. So that needs to take place over time, right? It does not happen overnight. I've been practicing this for a really long time. I still have to practice it, right? It's like very consistent. I have to go, okay, here's what's coming up for me. I'm afraid to say that because I don't want to upset that person. Now is not the right time. I don't want to disappoint them, right? And I can come up with a million excuses, right? So it becomes about, how can I quiet the noise and learn to more consistently lead with love and say what it is that I feel in the moment in a non-threatening way, right?
Yeah.
In a more invitational way.
Yeah, this is beautiful. No, I think yes, this is very helpful, and it just really comes back to that self-awareness of not having to wait until your internal system is screaming at you so loud, but we have the self-awareness to be able to go, I see what's going on when it's this big, instead of it being like, having to like knock you out.
And I will also just say, Justin, this is important. Like, you will start to generate excitement about setting boundaries when you start setting them and you start to reap the rewards of that experience, right? Suddenly it becomes so empowering, right? It's not a power play. So I don't want it to come across as hierarchical in any way. It is empowering, right? It is like, oh, I am enough. I am lovable. I am worthy of, of feeling these things and speaking them and asking for what I need and having my needs met, right? What a beautiful thing. And for those of us who experience trauma, especially in early childhood, it's like we have to relearn, right? Or learn for the first time those truths, right? And so it can be extremely difficult, right? The smallest boundary can feel incredibly overwhelming. So I don't want to undermine how challenging it is to start setting boundaries, right?
Because it is.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say it is. And it's so funny you said this is what I was thinking is, once I started setting boundaries and then like pausing, having the resilience and watching what happened, it's like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Like this really works. And so you become less scared.
Only healthy relationships.
Yeah. And it's like, oh, and then all the people who don't hold my boundaries, they're gone. And now I have like these great people in my life. And so anyway, that's really good. So I have a few questions, if it's okay, just because of the sake of time, that I want to get to. And people are giving these incredible stories, and I want to apologize in advance that we won't be able to get to all of them. So I am just going to pull this one because you had started writing it first. And so this person, I'm just not saying their name because I'm not sure about privacy. So they said they're going through a breakup of a 6-year relationship, and they live together with 5 more months on the lease. They
Mhm.
both want a friendship, but they're not sure. Do they need to not relate at all to be able to do this with mutual care? Or is there another, how would you recommend handling this situation?
That's a great question. So again, it depends on the circumstances of the relationship, right? Because there is no, one way to do a breakup, right? There are no rules here. So this becomes about the two of you communicating about what feels most resonant to the two of you, right? And if what you're experiencing is that we want to be friends, like that's the story we're telling ourselves and that's the vision we have for our future relationship, but we're experiencing too much dissonance in the relationship right now. There's too much conflict, there's confusion, we're living together, but we're broken up, but we're wanting to move on, but we're wanting to be friends, and all of those feelings are kind of complicating. Then what you guys need to do is come together and make and assess whether or not you can enter into that level of intimate friendship, right? Sometimes sometimes we need a little distance in order to re-engage from a different paradigm.
Yeah.
But again, it's like I have seen so many different manifestations of this. And so I think it's about the two of you because it's a relationship and you're both navigating the outcome together. It becomes about the two of you deciding to sit down and check in with here's what I'm feeling, here's what's not working, here's what I'm afraid of, here's what I ideally want, but it doesn't seem to be happening.
Yeah.
What do we do about that?
What do
And
we do?
we can come together to you don't need to, in a relationship dynamic like that, you don't necessarily need to come up with the solution before you enter the conversation. And I think that's another thing that's really important about boundaries is we set boundaries when we set them too late, right? Like the previous question had mentioned, when we set them too late, right, we've missed the opportunity to engage in a kind of collaborative process, right? And we're just at a point where our system is so overwhelmed that we have to respond in this more harsh way, right? So
Yeah.
so be collaborative as much as possible.
That's beautiful. And it reminds me just your whole teaching of coming into it with the space, saying, here's the outcomes that we want to have, having a conversation about it. Let's try this. That doesn't work as a boundary. Okay, we have to adapt. Like we have to make a different boundary or a stronger boundary or less of a boundary, whatever it is that seems like it needs to show up. Thank you so much for asking that question. Can I ask you maybe, they have so many, it's so hard for me to choose, but I think, can I ask you two more and we can be a little quick if it's possible
Yep.
about them? Okay, so this person said they're struggling with a parent who has moved back into their grandfather's house to help as a caretaker. Wait, hold on. Let me make sure I'm getting this right. Okay, struggling with a parent who has moved back into my grandfather's house to help as a caretaker. The three of us live here now, and this parent struggles with setting and maintaining boundaries and communicating. They often shut me out and give me the silent treatment when I do something that upsets them, but they do not communicate these issues with me, and it creates so much tension in the household that it's so unnecessary and unhealthy. Okay, so there's a second person who's come in to help take care of the grandparent, and these two people who are there together are having a lot of trouble because one isn't communicating. So what would you say about handling this situation? Is this a boundaries issue?
Yes, there's some boundary issues in the question. I guess what I missed, Justin, was who is it the person asking the question that's having trouble setting the boundary, or she's noticing something between the other two?
I think it's the person asking the question having the boundaries. Yeah, the three of us live here now, and this parent struggles with the other person that moved in has struggle with setting and maintaining boundaries and communicating. They often shut me out and give me the
Okay.
silent treatment when I do something that upsets them, but they
Okay.
do nothing to communicate these issues. So I think we're getting it. Is that clear?
Got it.
Cool.
So I mean, yes. So what's the thing that stands out for me is silent treatment, right? Because silence is a form of abuse. It is a power play, right? And many of us have been in relationships where we have somebody in our lives, or maybe we are the people that respond to upset with a passive emotional cutoff, right? I'm not going
I
to
hate when
engage.
people do that. It's the worst. It's
Very
like the
frustrating.
worst. Yeah.
Very frustrating. Yeah. Because you've just been excluded from the solutioning process. right? And it's also very painful. And what happens is that person that is silencing you, right? Because if it's hard not to be impacted by somebody giving you the silent treatment. It in fact is crazy making when someone's giving you the silent treatment. So essentially, that person is exercising power over you, right? And of course, it's coming from their own pain. We don't do things like this unless we're in pain. So we can hold a space of compassion for the person who's engaging in this practice. But for you, this is about, especially if you're living in the home. Again, it's about you really taking care of yourself, okay? Because that's really painful, and I want to acknowledge that for one. And it's going to be about you getting really creative, right? There is a possibility that you could come up with creative ways to address the silence, right? When you silence me, you don't include me in what it is that you need, and I really want to be able to support you, right? So you come to them in a non-threatening way, saying like, I really want to be a support to you. And when you become upset with me, you silence me, and then I don't get to help you and I don't get to participate in this process with you. Help me understand what it is that I could be doing differently so that we can, connect, right? And so there's that piece, right? There's the invitational non-threatening piece, right? And that's one way to get the conversation started, right? If you go straight for you're silencing me and that's not, appropriate, they're likely to be defensive, especially if they already use silence as a strategy.
Yeah.
So my encouragement to you would, again, to go in an invitational way and to get creative with how do I connect with this person? I'm not even going to give that silence. I'm going to go and connect with this person. I'm not going to give the silence any energy right now. Right?
So you create that safe space of connection first.
Once you've broken through some of that tension, maybe there's an opportunity at that point to say, right, what it is that you experience when they silence you.
Yeah.
Right. And how you would really love to, experience something different within the relationship in terms of communication. So, but again, I recognize, this is also about you taking care of yourself.
Beautiful.
Right?
Beautiful. Beautiful. Let me go to the final question. And then we'll close out with a little action. I feel like this whole thing is an action, so I don't even know that we need an action step, but like maybe you have something to tell people. So the final question, and thank you all for those of you who wrote in your vulnerable questions here. No, if we could, I would answer all of them, but we'd be here until tomorrow. So let's do this last one here, and I'm just kind of going in order. She says, I'm not holding boundaries with my ex-husband. I initiated the divorce. We have a son, but haven't set up a co-parenting plan because of COVID. So I end up driving like 30 minutes a day to his house so that we can be all together because they don't have a co-parenting plan. How do I deal with my guilt of leaving and set boundaries?
Got it. This is a great question. And thank you for adding the part about how do I deal with my guilt.
Yeah, it's big.
Because the guilt is the reason that you are not setting boundaries. Because the story that you are telling yourself is that I've done something wrong by leaving my marriage, even though it wasn't working for me. That by being the one that initiated and potentially by doing that when he was not feeling the same way or interested in the same outcome, that somehow I'm responsible for his feelings, right? So this is a core pain picture, right? This is a lie. You are not responsible for his feelings. If what you determine, right, is that what is in your highest and best good is to no longer be in a relationship, then even if the other person has not arrived to that same conclusion, right, it is in the highest and best good of all. And you need to trust that, right? In almost every breakup, one partner arrives at that awareness first. Right? They have to demonstrate leadership. They may be the person that has to say, I'm going to walk away even though my partner is not ready for this, right? That does not mean you then have to punish yourself, okay? So that's the piece that I really want you to be focusing on is how am I punishing myself, right? As a result of this guilt. How can I break agreements with the lie, right? How can I break agreements with the lie that I am responsible for him, that I'm responsible for his feelings, that that I have to carry his guilt because of a choice that I made, right? These are all kind of lies that are circulating in your system. And Justin, actually, if you put the last slide up, I think I say something
Yeah.
about this,
Yes,
right?
yes, yes. Perfect way to segue there.
Yeah, every time you set a boundary, right, it liberates you from your core pain pictures and limiting beliefs. This is really important, right? So don't think of a boundary as just this, like, it's like these are huge in terms of what they do for your healing process, right? So I'm so like in awe of you for having the courage to walk away from the relationship that wasn't serving you. That's incredibly brave. And now the opportunity is for you to work through how you are holding yourself hostage to these lies, right?
Mm,
And let go of the need to punish yourself, right?
yeah.
And let him have his own experience of this. And one of the ways that you can process that on an emotional level, right? And then you can also demonstrate your process through action. And that would be initiating a co parenting plan, initiating some other steps, right? And tolerating his resistance and his disappointment if that's what emerges throughout the process.
This is so amazing, Kasey. This is so amazing. And we could literally go on and on, but I'm gonna pause us because I know people, I want to respect people's time who've been here with us a little longer than expected, but I think this has been so worthwhile. People are blowing up the chat right now. And you have just given us such a gift. And normally we say, okay, what is our action step and what is our practice and all of these kinds of things, but I think you've given us right now in saying that boundaries is a verb, the action's clear. Like, where do we need to set boundaries in our lives and to step
Well,
into
you know
that?
what? And I would leave you with one more thing in terms of action. Before you set the boundary, right? If you think there's a boundary you need to set, I would first ask myself the question, what is the story I'm telling myself about why I can't do that?
Mm.
Okay. Everybody write that down, right? It's like,
Right, type it in the chat, y'all. I'm writing it down too.
what is the story I'm telling myself about why I cannot set this boundary, right? Because that's going to be a window into the healing process,
And what do you
right?
do with what you find from that? So let's say it's because I'm afraid that they're going to get mad at me and not want to work with me anymore, or something like that. Then what do you do with
Okay.
that?
Then my practice is about letting go of my attachment to outcomes, trusting in my knowing, building resilience to their disappointment, right? Reminding myself that it's okay to listen to my knowing, even if I don't know what the outcome is. Really moving into, we talked about this last week because we both love prayer so much as a support, but it's like, when I'm going to set a boundary, I'm always like, okay, spirit, support me here. Like, what is it that I need to know? Help me embody the best version of myself as I communicate this. Hold me as I tolerate this discomfort. Show me the way through this, right? And as you start to ask questions like that, information does reveal itself, right? More opportunity for healing will reveal itself. You have to know that when you move a chess piece, the whole board changes. So setting a boundary is one action step in a whole ripple effect of actions that will ultimately take place, right? But it's like we have to have the courage to set that first boundary in order to get to that next step. So instead of thinking too far ahead about what the next steps are, stay with what's present. In this moment, here's what's true, here's what I do.
That is amazing. What is the story that I'm telling myself about why I cannot set this boundary? I'm going right into this practice as soon as we hang up, y'all. I don't know about you. So I want to give everybody a moment. One of the things that we do consistently here, Kasey, is we give people the opportunity to set what's called their golden nugget from this experience. And I'll read some of them back to you as people type them in. And so as we go into this little golden nugget practice, everybody, just to place your hands over your heart for a moment and just to take a second now to consider what is the main takeaway that you have received from this experience today. You can close your eyes. There was a lot, right? There was a lot that we've been blessed with from Kasey. So what is your one main takeaway from this session on the power of boundaries? Let that drop into your heart. And then when you feel ready, open your eyes and type that into the chat box. And as we discuss the power of boundaries, you know, Kasey, I was thinking about a quote that Nico Carey had said at your workshop that I thought was really important. And then I want to tell people how they can engage with you further in the new year. Is Nico gave this amazing quote that was like worked off of another quote, but what he said was, boundaries are the space. No, boundaries are the space or the distance where I can love myself and love you simultaneously.
I love that.
I just thought it
That's
was
right.
so beautiful. Like, boundaries are the space in which I can love myself and love you simultaneously. And I thought that was really a beautiful way to communicate this space that we're creating of compassion and love and care by setting boundaries instead of looking at them as this crazy, this
That's right.
crazy harsh rule.
Yeah, they are. That's so true.
So people are loving these breaking agreements with the lie. When a mystery arises, another mystery comes. You can't go wrong with loyalty to your soul. Loyalty to your soul. Boundaries are not evil. If you're loyal to your soul, you can't go wrong. What is the story I'm telling myself? Awareness is not enough. Boundaries are acts of self-love. Maybe start small. I mean, just so many things coming in. Can set boundaries to others and not disappoint. It's just amazing. And so Kasey, I want people to know. So, first of all, if you guys go to Kasey's website, KaseyCrown.com, that's KaseyCrown.com, you can see, I'm
CRWN.
sorry, yes, CROWN. I know that. CROWN.com. And you can sign up for her email list because Kasey in the new year is going to have a newsletter going out with some workshops and some public offerings that she has. But Kasey actually isn't taking on one-on-one clients right now, but has a really cool way that she works that I just wanted her to give the opportunity to speak about. So if you want to share with us, Kasey, a little about your business model, that would be amazing.
Sure. Yeah. So I have a private practice, a psychotherapy practice that I've had for a long time, and it stays a certain size at this point. And then I focus on private workshops and public offerings. And my private workshops, of course, people pay for those. They tend to be people with means that pay for those. And so what I've done is I've created a model where 100% of the income from my workshops goes toward providing services, mental health services in particular, to marginalized communities. And so even though I'm receiving payment from workshop participants, that money is getting funneled back in to provide mental health resources for people who can't afford them. So yeah,
Amazing.
it's great. And I love what I do. And hopefully we'll have some more public offerings to share with you all in the new year. So I'm excited
Yeah,
to.
and I love some of the organizations that you're donating to this year, like the for families. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so one, obviously, Pandemic of Love, our friend Shelley's organization, is a recipient of our 2020 income. And then the Relational Center in Los Angeles, if any of you are in LA, they're a great resource for mental health and community building services. We're developing a pilot program with them to provide mental health services for children and families that have been separated at the border while seeking asylum, and who have gone through pretty traumatic experiences attempting to flee poverty and violence in their own countries. So that's one of our programs, and yeah, a couple other
It's just
recipients.
so amazing, Kasey. And I just want you all to know, like, I'm very careful, obviously, about who I bring to the kingdom. And Kasey is a total sister. Like, she's done so much deep work on social justice, on white privilege, on white, just the whole thing, and gives back and wraps this all to communities in need. And so Kasey is the truth. And so if you all have if you go to her website, trust me, and sign. I took her workshop, so if I'm taking it, and participating, you guys show up, put your name on her email list, and you'll have much more coming from Kasey, including more writings and things that she's working on in the future. So Kasey, I love you. I'm so thankful. I'm so grateful that you're here, and we're just like honoring you so big as we close out from the kingdom today. And
Thank you
so
for having me. Thank you to everybody for your vulnerability and your questions. And I love you, Justin.
Love you, girl. Thank you, Kasey. And for all of you here now, I just want to thank you for showing up today to the kingdom, to this incredible time that we have to spend together here. And, that is such a gift. It really is such a gift to talk about the power of boundaries and the power of what we can do. So remember, we're adopting another family for the holidays. I put the link in the chat box for all of you. This is Sabrina's wish list. That's in the chat box. Let's get this family everything that they need. And, last but not least, this is our moment, y'all. This is the moment that we have to really come together, to change for ourselves, to liberate ourselves, to change for the future generations and for our families. And, one of the things that I always love, saying is that quote from Sheila Marie that you often hear me saying, everybody, is what doesn't heal repeats. What doesn't heal repeats. And so by the work that we're doing on ourselves right now, we're healing generations forward and backwards. I love you all. Thank you for making this session 22, which is my birthday number, February 22nd. Number 22, our first kingdom with over 1,000 people. And guess what? We have 1,022 people. How about that for a little bit of magic? So I love you all so much. And I'll meet you right here in this very special place next Sunday. Bye for now. Mwah.